He was the fast-talking car dealer who helped turn rusted wrecks into roaring classics. And along the way, Mike Brewer built Wheeler Dealers into a global automotive empire. But behind the charm, the deals, and the glossy garage doors, there's a story fans were never told. A sudden feud, a shocking departure, and a backlash so fierce it nearly destroyed him. Why did Edd China really walk away? What role did Mike play? And what secrets from behind the scenes have remained buried until now? This is the untold truth of Mike Brewer. From his rise as a street-smart car trader to the silent war that shattered one of TV's most iconic partnerships, and the dark fallout that nearly cost him everything. Get ready to uncover the drama, the tension, and the truth that's been hiding in plain sight. Before we dive into the video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos like this. Now let's get into the video. Before he became the face of one of the most successful car restoration shows on television, Mike Brewer was just a South London lad with petrol in his veins and a sharp tongue that could sell anything with wheels. Born on August 28, 1964, in Lambeth, London, Mike was raised around cars from day one. His father, Roger Brewer, ran a car customizing shop, and young Mike spent much of his childhood surrounded by hot rods, grease, and roaring engines. He didn't fall into the car world by accident, it was his inheritance. But where his father excelled under the hood, Mike had a different gift: salesmanship. He had the charm, the wit, and the confidence to make deals happen. That gift would carry him further than any engine could. As a teenager, he worked as a car trader, flipping second-hand vehicles and mastering the art of negotiation. He could talk cars, talk people, and more importantly, talk money. His hustle was relentless, and soon, that magnetic personality caught the attention of television producers looking for someone who could talk shop and captivate an audience at the same time. His first real break came with shows like Deals on Wheels and Pulling Power in the late 90s. Audiences loved him. He was brash, fast-talking, and knew his stuff. He wasn't just a presenter pretending to like cars. He lived and breathed the industry. But Mike Brewer wanted more. He didn't just want to be a face on TV. He wanted to build something. A show that combined his passion for the deal with the magic of car restoration. Something different. Something lasting. In 2003, that chance arrived. Partnering with Discovery Channel, Mike pitched a new concept, a show where he'd buy beat-up cars, bring in a mechanic to restore them, and then flip them for a profit. It was simple, it was honest, it was Wheeler Dealers. The only thing missing was the right partner to turn wrenches and bring these machines back to life. That partner would be Edd China, and together, they would change automotive television forever. In 2003, Wheeler Dealers hit the airwaves, and television hadn't seen anything quite like it. At a time when car shows were either about flashy races or superficial overviews, Mike Brewer introduced a different formula. He wasn't just test-driving exotic supercars. He was diving into the heart of used car culture, showing viewers how to buy, fix, and sell classics for a profit. Mike's role was clear: find the car, spot the deal, and negotiate the price. It was a job tailor-made for him. With his Cockney charisma and razor-sharp instincts, he brought energy and accessibility to the car scene. But even he knew the show needed more than just a good dealer. It needed a mechanic who could earn the trust of viewers. Enter Edd China. Tall, quiet, and mechanically brilliant, Edd was the perfect counterbalance to Mike's high-octane personality. Where Mike was animated and quick-talking, Edd was thoughtful and technical. Their chemistry was unlikely, but it worked. It worked so well that Wheeler Dealers quickly became one of Discovery Channel's most successful shows. The early seasons focused on British classics, filmed in a small workshop in the UK. Mike would bring in tired cars, Minis, Triumphs, Fords, negotiate deals with quirky sellers, and pass them off to Edd. Edd would then take viewers through every gritty detail of the restoration, while Mike returned to close the sale. It was educational, it was entertaining, and most importantly, it felt real. There was no fake drama, no overproduced tension, just two guys fixing cars and making deals. The show struck a nerve with viewers around the world. inspiring thousands to try their own restorations. Mike was soon recognized not just as a presenter, but as a pioneer of automotive television. He brought the hustle and the human touch. Edd brought the heart and the hands. For a while, Wheeler Dealers was unstoppable. But as the show grew, so did the pressures, and the perfect formula was about to be tested in ways neither of them expected. As Wheeler Dealers gained momentum, the show's producers saw a new opportunity: America. In 2013, the production moved to the United States, and with it came access to a whole new automotive landscape. Classic muscle cars, rare imports, vintage pickups, the possibilities were endless. For Mike Brewer, this was a dream. The U.S. market was massive, and the move meant more screen time, bigger deals, and a broader audience. He embraced the change with full force, navigating the American car scene with the same confidence that had made him a star in the U.K. Mike's negotiation skills flourished in the U.S. He talked down grizzled collectors, found hidden gems in dusty barns, and kept his finger on the pulse of classic car values. His personality translated well: loud, funny, and always ready for a deal. The American viewers loved him, and he loved the fast pace. But for Edd China, the move wasn't as smooth. The demands of American television production were intense. Faster turnarounds, longer hours, tighter edits. The educational step-by-step mechanical segments that Edd had once been praised for began getting cut down. Mike, ever the businessman, adapted. He saw the value in evolving the show to fit new expectations. But the more the show leaned into speed and sizzle, the more the original spirit of Wheeler Dealers began to fade. Edd was increasingly frustrated by how much technical detail was being lost on the cutting room floor. Still, the show soared. Ratings were high, the fan base was global, and Mike was enjoying newfound fame in the States. Car shows came and went, but Wheeler Dealers remained a staple of Discovery's programming. But behind the scenes, the cracks in the partnership were growing deeper. The camera kept rolling, but the tension was becoming harder to hide. It wouldn't be long before everything changed, and when it did, it would send shockwaves through the automotive world. In 2017, Edd China released a YouTube video that blindsided the fan base. He was leaving Wheeler Dealers.
Yes, I'm afraid it's true, and I'm really sorry. After 13 years of making Wheeler Dealers, I'm now going to be leaving the show.
Calm and composed, Edd explained that his departure was the result of creative differences. The network, now under the Motor Trend brand, wanted to reduce the amount of time spent on mechanical work. The very thing Edd believed was the show's backbone. Mike Brewer didn't see it coming, at least not like this. The announcement hadn't come through Discovery. There was no joint statement, just Edd, alone, telling the world why he couldn't continue. The response was immediate and brutal. Fans flooded message boards and social media demanding answers. Many pointed the finger squarely at Mike, assuming he had sided with the network or pushed Edd out. The backlash spiraled into something far darker than criticism. Mike and his family began receiving threats. Online abuse escalated to real-world fear. In interviews, Mike revealed that one fan threatened to murder him and others targeted his teenage daughter. Police were involved. The experience left deep scars. But Mike stayed professional. He expressed disappointment in how Edd chose to go public, but he never lashed out.
My social media pages will be full of people CUNT and saying bring back Edd, fuck you, and that'd be 7 years later. But, I don't care.
I respect his decision, he said, but I wish it had been handled differently. Privately, those close to the situation say Mike felt betrayed. For years, they'd built the show side by side. He believed they owed it to each other and to the fans to end things properly. But instead, he was left holding the bag, trying to steer a ship that suddenly felt half empty. The partnership that had defined a television era was over. And Mike Brewer, for the first time in his career, found himself cast not as the hero, but as the villain. In the aftermath of Edd China's departure, the dynamic that once powered Wheeler Dealers collapsed into silence. Neither Mike nor Edd publicly attacked the other, but between the lines, something was broken. Fans weren't just mourning the end of an era. They were dissecting the fallout, desperate for answers. The most burning question: what really happened between Mike and Edd? Officially, the narrative stayed polite. Mike insisted he had no part in forcing Edd out, and Edd maintained that his departure was strictly due to creative differences with the network. But those close to the production claimed things had been tense long before 2017. As the show expanded, so did the pressure. Mike, always the showman, was keen to adapt, to meet the demands of a growing audience and an evolving platform. But Edd, committed to transparency and technical depth, reportedly resisted changes that diluted the content. Producers found themselves stuck in the middle. There were whispers of disagreements over control, over time on screen, and even over direction. Some crew members said there were days when the two barely spoke between shoots. Others claimed the real clash wasn't personal. It was philosophical. Mike wanted to keep the wheels turning, even if that meant making compromises. Edd, unwilling to dilute the integrity of the mechanics, saw those compromises as deal breakers. The silent feud that followed only added fuel to the fire. The lack of reconciliation or even a united farewell left a void that fans filled with speculation. For some, Mike became the scapegoat, the man who let television politics destroy a legendary partnership. For others, he was a survivor, shouldering the burden of a show that needed to evolve. And through it all, neither man broke their silence to reveal the full truth. But behind the cameras, the bond that once seemed unbreakable had quietly, and perhaps irreversibly, snapped. To the outside world, Mike Brewer was still winning. Wheeler Dealers was back with a new co-host, ratings were steady, and the brand remained strong. But behind the scenes, Mike was unraveling. The abuse he received following Edd's departure wasn't just noise, it was deeply personal. When threats reached his daughter, everything changed. In interviews, Mike spoke of the emotional toll, sleepless nights, police protection, and a growing sense that the fans he once loved were now out for blood. "I became the villain overnight," he said. "I went from being the guy who made dreams happen to the guy people wanted to destroy." The show that had brought him global recognition had now brought him fear, anxiety, and a darkness he hadn't expected. Sources close to him suggest he considered stepping away entirely. The joy was gone, replaced by dread. And it wasn't just the hate. Internally, the show was shifting. Ant Anstead was now in Edd's place, and while Ant brought a new energy and mechanical knowledge, the comparisons were constant. Fans were ruthless. Every episode was scrutinized. Every smile from Mike was questioned. Behind closed doors, Mike struggled with panic attacks. Crew members noticed he was more withdrawn, less confident, more guarded. He continued smiling for the camera, but those who knew him say the experience left a mark that still hasn't fully healed. Fame had made Mike Brewer a household name, but it had also isolated him, hardened him, and dragged him through one of the most brutal public reckonings a TV presenter could face. Still, he kept going, because if there's one thing Mike Brewer has always done, it's finish the deal. After the dust settled, Wheeler Dealers had to adapt. The void left by Edd China couldn't be filled, but it had to be addressed. Enter Ant Anstead, a charming, knowledgeable former police officer and professional car builder with a background in restoration. Ant brought a new flavor to the show. He was articulate, hands-on, and approachable, someone who could explain complex mechanics with clarity. Fans were hesitant at first, but many warmed to him over time. The chemistry with Mike wasn't the same as with Edd, but it was fresh, and it kept the show moving. Mike leaned into this new format. He adjusted his energy, found new banter rhythms, and committed to rebranding the show for a modern audience. The repair segments were still there, but shorter, flashier, and more aligned with Motor Trend's faster-paced style. Then came Mark Elvis Priestley, a former F1 mechanic, as the next co-host. With Elvis, the show regained a touch of the old UK flavor. He was knowledgeable and laid back, less flashy than Ant, but more technical. Still, fans who longed for the Edd era remained vocal. Mike, for his part, embraced each change with professionalism. He became the constant, the anchor who carried the show through every transition. While the spirit of the early days had faded, Wheeler Dealers retained a core audience that kept it alive. But it was no longer the same show. It was sleeker, faster, and more entertainment-driven. Mike had reinvented the brand out of necessity, not to betray the past, but to protect the future. Yet every new episode came with the same haunting echo. It's good, but it's not Ed. And for Mike Brewer, that shadow would never fully disappear. Despite everything, fan backlash, co-host turnover, and personal torment, Mike Brewer never walked away. While others might have buckled under the weight of public criticism, he kept the Wheeler Dealer's engine running. And in doing so, he carved out a complicated but undeniable legacy. The show continued to evolve. New formats, new locations, new approaches to restorations. Mike remained at the center, smiling through interviews, showing up to car shows and signing autographs. His enthusiasm never faded, even if the warmth he once felt from fans had been chilled by betrayal. But behind the curtain, he knew things had changed. He wasn't just a car guy on TV anymore. He was a symbol of a split that still divided fans, a man both respected for building something great and resented for being the face that stayed when the one fans loved most walked away. And yet, there's something admirable in Mike's persistence. He never stopped fighting for the show, even as comments compared him to a used car salesman who lost the soul of the series. He kept grinding. Off-screen, he used his platform for more than just profit. He launched car restoration projects for veterans, supported small garages, and continued to champion classic car culture wherever he went. While others saw a tarnished legacy, Mike saw unfinished work. To him, Wheeler Dealers was never just a job. It was a mission. And no amount of hate, no co-host exit, not even the scars left by a global fan war would stop him from honoring what he helped create. Because Mike Brewer wasn't just trying to preserve a show. He was trying to preserve an identity, his own. As years passed, the question never faded. Will Mike Brewer and Edd China ever work together again? Fans have asked it in every forum, interview, and Q&A session. And while neither man has closed the door completely, the odds grow slimmer with each passing season. Mike has addressed the idea with cautious optimism. "You never know," he said. "Life's long. Maybe one day." But there's a guardedness in his tone, a hesitation that suggests wounds not fully healed. For Edd, the stance is similar, non-committal but not cold. In rare interviews, he's acknowledged the importance of what they built, but has also made it clear that his priorities now lie in independence and creative freedom. Some say pride keeps them apart. Others believe it's deeper, too much left unsaid, too much damage done. After all, their fallout wasn't just a professional split, it was personal. They weren't just co-workers, they were partners, brothers in arms in the world of grease and gears. Their rise was shared, but their fall, it was endured alone. A reunion would require more than ratings or nostalgia. It would require reconciliation. And for now, there's no sign of that happening. Still, fans cling to hope. A one-off special, a candid podcast, a shared build even for charity, something to bring closure, something to prove that two men who once made car TV magic can sit across from each other again. Not as presenters, but as friends. Until then, all we have is silence and speculation. Mike Brewer's journey is one of contradictions. He's a car dealer who became a TV star, a fan favorite who became a lightning rod, a man who helped build something brilliant, only to be blamed for watching it fall apart. And yet, he never quit. He didn't retreat from the spotlight. He didn't fire back at the hate. He kept going, one deal at a time, one episode at a time. Because for Mike, Wheeler Dealers wasn't just about cars, it was about proving that he could take a passion and turn it into something lasting. Yes, the chemistry with Edd China was special. Yes, the show changed. But Mike evolved. He adapted. He rebuilt. And that's something few in the world of television ever managed to do. His story isn't clean. It's not polished chrome and happy endings. It's scratched, bruised, and full of uncomfortable truths. But it's real. Mike Brewer is, above all else, a survivor. A man who has lived through the best and worst of fame and who still shows up, camera ready, to do what he loves. His legacy will forever be tangled with Edd's. Their story of success, division, and unanswered questions has become legend. But Mike's chapter isn't over. Not yet. Because while others dwell on what was lost, Mike Brewer is still chasing what comes next.
And for better or worse, he's not done dealing yet.
For years, Discovery have been encouraging everyone to make your world bigger. And that is exactly what I'm now doing. And then also, of course, you had to be able to serve ice cream before and after the event. And that was really the nub of the problem.
He was the quiet genius with oil-stained hands and a towering presence in the garage, Edd China, the man who turned wheeler dealers into the gold standard of automotive television. For over a decade, he showed us how to fix the unfixable, restore the forgotten, and believe that even the rustiest classics deserved a second chance. But in 2017, he vanished from the show without warning. No farewell episode, no explanation from the network. Just a cryptic video and a firestorm of rumors. Fans were stunned. Why did Edd really walk away? Was it a simple creative split? Or something darker beneath the surface? In this deep dive, we uncover the untold story of Edd China. His rise from quirky inventor to global icon. The secret conflicts that fractured wheeler dealers. The private struggles he never spoke of. And the bold reinvention that proved he didn't need a network to thrive. From engineering prodigy to rebel mechanic, this is the truth you've never heard. And once you do, you'll never see him the same way again. Before we dive into the video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more videos like this. Now let's get into the video. Before he became a household name for car enthusiasts across the globe, Edd China was just a curious kid in London with a knack for pulling things apart and, more importantly, putting them back together. Born on May 9th, 1971, Edward John China always stood out. Not just because he would eventually grow to be over 6'7", but because his brain worked in ways most people couldn't grasp. Engineering wasn't just a career path, it was his language. He saw the world in gears, circuits, and mechanical puzzles waiting to be solved. Edd pursued that passion at London South Bank University, where he studied engineering product design. It was here that his creativity truly began to bloom, and one project would change his life forever. As a student, he built the Casual Loafer, a motorized, street-legal sofa. Yes, a sofa you could drive down the road. It was wild, impractical, and utterly brilliant. That invention landed him on British TV shows like Top Gear, The Big Breakfast, and Scrap Heap Challenge. Viewers were instantly drawn to the tall, soft-spoken inventor with a quirky sense of humor and boundless imagination. His early appearances made one thing clear. Edd wasn't just an inventor or a mechanic. He was an entertainer with a deep love for making the impossible real. Unlike many presenters, he wasn't trying to sell a gimmick. He was the gimmick. His creations, like the fastest motorized toilet or a drivable office desk, earned him multiple Guinness World Records and a cult following. But underneath the eccentric charm was an engineer's heart and a deep desire to teach. While other car shows glorified speed and spectacle, Edd wanted to slow things down. He wanted to explain how machines worked, to demystify the intimidating world of engines, transmissions, and suspensions. That rare combination of showmanship and substance made him a perfect fit for something much bigger than motorized couches. That something would arrive in 2003 and change his life, and automotive television, forever. In 2003, Wheeler Dealers premiered on British television, offering something refreshingly different. A car show that wasn't about flashy stunts or high-speed races. It was about the journey of transformation, taking tired, worn-out vehicles and turning them into automotive gems. And at the center of that transformation was a new on-screen duo, Mike Brewer, a fast-talking, street-smart car dealer, and Edd China, the soft-spoken, ultra-technical mechanic. Mike would hunt down hidden gems, cars with potential but usually in poor shape, then negotiate the best price. Once the deal was done, the spotlight shifted to Edd, who rolled up his sleeves and dove under the hood. He didn't just fix cars, he explained how he did it. Whether it was rebuilding an engine, rewiring an electrical system, or tuning carburetors, Edd broke it all down with a clarity that resonated with amateurs and seasoned mechanics alike. His workspace was always a bit messy, his hands always greasy, but that was the magic. Viewers felt like they were in the garage with him. There was no script reading, no over-the-top dramatics, just raw, genuine restoration. Fans quickly connected with the show's authentic tone. While Mike brought personality and sharp negotiating skills, Edd balanced the show with calm expertise and meticulous attention to detail. The chemistry between the two hosts was undeniable. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were creative differences, different priorities, and the occasional sarcastic jab. But their contrast was what made the show sing. Mike represented the business side of car culture, Edd the soul. And together, they took viewers on a journey that was as educational as it was entertaining. As seasons passed, the cars got more complex, and so did the audience. What began as a niche UK show quietly grew into a global success. But behind the scenes, that success came with pressure. More episodes, bigger budgets, and, eventually, a shift that would take them across the Atlantic and change everything. By 2013, Wheeler Dealers had achieved something few British car shows could: international acclaim. The producers decided to take things further by relocating the show's production to the United States. On paper, it was a dream come true. America offered a massive market, a rich car culture, and endless restoration opportunities. The cars were different, the stakes were higher, and the potential for growth was enormous. For Edd, it was both exciting and challenging. He was no stranger to mechanical complexity, but adapting to a new production style in a new country required compromise. Filming schedules tightened, network expectations grew. What was once a relaxed and in-depth look at repairs slowly began to shift toward a more fast-paced, entertainment-first format. Fans noticed. Repair sequences became shorter. Technical depth was sometimes glossed over in favor of quicker edits and more dramatic sales footage. Some episodes, Edd later admitted, featured work done behind the scenes that was never shown on air. Not because of secrecy, but because there simply wasn't time. The changes, while subtle at first, began to wear on Edd. Viewers still praised his craftsmanship, but behind the scenes, creative tensions grew. Edd pushed for more educational content. The network wanted quicker turnarounds. It wasn't just about making TV anymore. It was about scaling it. As production ramped up, the team was tasked with producing more episodes per season, leaving little room for Edd's signature deep dives into complex repairs. It was no longer just about passion. It was about production deadlines, advertiser demands, and market metrics. Edd started to feel like the heart of the show, the mechanics, was being amputated for mass appeal. Still, he tried to adapt. But the show he had helped build from the ground up was evolving into something unfamiliar. In 2017, Edd China dropped a bombshell on YouTube. He was leaving Wheeler Dealers. No grand send-off from the network. No farewell episode. Just a quiet, honest video titled "Goodbye Wheeler Dealers." In it, he laid out the uncomfortable truth. He didn't want to leave, but he had no choice. The network, now operating under the Motor Trend brand, had demanded a new production format, one that would drastically reduce the time spent on detailed mechanical work. For Edd, that was a red line. He believed that showing how things were fixed, and stripping that away meant stripping away everything that made Wheeler Dealers special. He spoke calmly, but the disappointment was clear. He wasn't just quitting a job, he was walking away from a legacy. Fans were stunned. Some cried, others raged. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Social media lit up with anger toward Motor Trend, the producers, and even Mike Brewer. Mike, for his part, expressed sadness at Edd's decision and frustration over the fallout. But things quickly spiraled. Mike revealed that he and his family received death threats. Some fans blamed him entirely for Edd's exit. His daughter was targeted online. He had to call the police. What was once a beloved show about fixing cars had turned into a lightning rod for controversy. And at the center of it all was a man who just wanted to keep fixing things the right way. The partnership that had defined a generation of car TV was over. Edd was out. And Wheeler Dealers, for better or worse, would never be the same again. Edd China's departure from Wheeler Dealers didn't just shake the show, it ignited a firestorm across the car enthusiast world. The fan base, which had long been united by a shared love for classic restorations and Edd's methodical explanations, suddenly fractured. Some blamed the network, others blamed Mike Brewer, but almost no one blamed Edd. Social media became a battleground. Fans vented their frustration across forums, YouTube comment sections, and Twitter threads. For many, it wasn't just about a mechanic leaving a TV show. It felt like the soul of the series had been ripped out. Edd tried to stay out of the chaos. His farewell video wasn't bitter. It was clear, polite, and respectful. But the damage had been done. What no one expected, however, was just how dark the backlash would become. Mike Brewer, who had spent years as the face of wheeler dealers alongside Edd, soon found himself in a personal nightmare. In interviews with The Sun and Drive Tribe, Mike revealed that he and his family had been bombarded with abuse. The online hate turned into real-world fear. "I had to get the police involved because someone threatened to come round and murder me," he said. "It was that bad. My daughter was targeted too." Fans who once idolized the show were now attacking the people behind it. The emotional investment had run so deep that many felt betrayed. The show that had taught people how to fix cars, that had inspired home garage mechanics across the globe, had now become a cautionary tale about the dangers of change and the cult of personality. But even amid the chaos, one truth became increasingly clear. Edd China hadn't just left a show. He had left a statement, a refusal to compromise on quality, a rejection of dumbing down the craft. And for those who believed in what wheeler dealers once stood for, his decision felt more heroic than controversial. While Edd China has always appeared as the calm, collected engineer with a kind heart and quick wit, there are chapters of his story that have remained largely in the shadows. For years, he kept much of his personal life out of the public eye. But behind the calm facade, some cracks quietly emerged. Close friends and former colleagues have hinted that the stress of wheeler dealers had been building for longer than most fans realized. The increasingly grueling production schedules, frequent travel, and mounting pressure from network executives slowly wore on Edd. According to some insiders, he often clashed with producers off-camera, demanding more time to accurately show complex repairs, time the show's tightening budget didn't allow. Privately, Edd also wrestled with moments of anxiety and frustration. Sources close to him suggest that the disconnect between his on-screen persona and the behind-the-scenes realities took a toll. There were rumors of late-night breakdowns, of heated creative meetings where Edd would walk out, questioning if it was all worth it. His departure wasn't just a reaction to network edits, it was the result of years of internal conflict. The man who built a fan base on authenticity was quietly being pushed to betray that very principle, and it broke something in him. Additionally, there have been whispers of business ventures gone wrong. One such rumor involves a startup Edd briefly invested in, an alternative energy company that never made it out of prototype phase. Some say he lost a significant amount of money, while others claim it was a learning experience that fueled his later shift into self-produced content. But perhaps the darkest truth is one he's only alluded to: the deep loneliness that followed his exit. While fans were mourning the show's loss, Edd was navigating the abrupt end of a decade-long chapter, one filled with long hours, hard work, and a bond with a co-host that had now dissolved in silence. After the dust settled, Edd China did something he'd never been able to do under a network's thumb. He built his own platform. In 2021, he launched Edd China's Workshop Diaries on YouTube, a series that marked a full-circle return to what fans loved most: pure mechanics, thoughtful narration, and deep technical dives. Gone were the glossy edits, forced timelines, and artificial deadlines. In their place, long-form episodes where Edd worked at his own pace, often on unusual and challenging vehicles. From electric conversions to quirky engineering experiments, each episode felt like a direct message to his loyal audience. "I'm still here, and I'm doing it my way now." The Workshop Diaries didn't explode with viral numbers overnight, but that wasn't the point. The show was intimate, personal, and built on trust. For fans who had followed Edd from the early wheeler dealers days, it was a welcome homecoming. He engaged directly with viewers, shared insights that never made it to TV, and reignited the educational spirit that had first made him famous. Perhaps most importantly, the workshop diaries gave Edd peace. No more producers, no more compromise. Just him, his tools, and the camera. It was a passion project, but also a quiet revolution in an age where content is often manufactured for clicks. He also began appearing at more fan events, car festivals, and technical forums. Slowly, Edd re-established his place in the automotive world, not as a former TV star, but as a craftsman who had walked away from fame to preserve his integrity. In a world where it's easy to sell out, Edd China stood firm, and that, in the eyes of many, made him more legendary than ever before. While Edd China found a new rhythm with workshop diaries, Mike Brewer faced a different path, one marked by public pressure, shifting co-hosts, and the heavy shadow of his old partner's legacy. Despite the backlash, Wheeler Dealers didn't end with Edd's departure. Instead, the show forged ahead with a new mechanic, Ant Anstead. Ant, a former police officer turned car builder, brought his own set of skills to the table. Charismatic, fast, and knowledgeable, he quickly found his rhythm with Mike. But for many fans, the chemistry just wasn't the same. The warmth, the quiet banter, the deep dive diagnostics, all of it felt missing. Where Edd had taken his time to explain each bolt and gasket, Ant's repairs were snappier, edited for a quicker pace. Mike defended the show's direction, emphasizing that the automotive world, and television itself, was changing. "You've got to evolve," he said in interviews. "You've got to move with the times." But even he admitted that the original magic couldn't quite be replicated. "What I had with Edd was unique," Mike told Drive Tribe. "You don't find that every day." The show later introduced Mark Elvis Priestley, a former Formula One mechanic, in an attempt to recapture some of that old balance. Elvis brought precision and a calm energy reminiscent of Edd, but comparisons were inevitable. No matter how talented the replacements were, the original format had set a standard that fans wouldn't forget. For Mike, the weight of public scrutiny didn't lift easily. Despite his success, the shadow of Edd lingered in every comment section and every nostalgic fan post. Though he never publicly lashed out, those close to the situation say Mike was deeply hurt by the fan backlash. He had devoted years of his life to the show, but the departure of one man nearly unraveled everything. Still, he pushed forward. Car shows, business ventures, charity auctions, Mike remained a public figure. But the bond he had with Edd China, once the foundation of a global franchise, was never rebuilt, and perhaps never will be. The question that haunts Wheeler Dealers fans more than any other: will Edd China and Mike Brewer ever work together again? The truth is, no one really knows. Publicly, both men have maintained a respectful distance. Neither has spoken negatively about the other, and neither has ruled out the possibility of a reunion. But their silence speaks volumes. It's the kind of silence that suggests wounds deeper than what fans saw on screen. Over the years, there have been rumors, some wild, some credible, about reconciliation attempts behind the scenes. A few suggest that producers floated the idea of a special episode featuring the original duo. Others claim that both men turned down opportunities because the timing, or the pain, wasn't right. Fans have pleaded for it. Reddit threads, YouTube petitions, social media campaigns. But every time the topic comes up in interviews, the responses are vague. Edd once said, "I'll never say never, but I'm happy doing my own thing now." Mike echoed something similar, stating, "The door's always open, but we've both moved on." At the heart of it, there's more than just professional friction. What many forget is that Mike and Edd were friends. The kind of friends who built a television empire together, traveled the world, and shared countless late nights in greasy garages. When Edd left, it wasn't just a co-host leaving a set, it was a friend walking out the door. Whether that friendship can ever be repaired is a mystery, but one thing remains certain: the legacy they built together, flawed, beloved, complicated, will always bind them in the eyes of fans. Edd China didn't just walk away from a hit show, he walked away from a system. In an era where success is often measured by viral clips and sponsorship deals, Edd took the road less traveled. He chose craftsmanship over commercialism, integrity over expediency, and in doing so, he created something rare: trust. Wheeler Dealers may still be running, but for many, it lives on as a memory of its golden years, when a tall, soft-spoken mechanic took time to teach, not just entertain. Edd's legacy is etched into the culture of DIY mechanics, YouTube tutorials, and garage hobbyists. The countless viewers who learned to change brake pads, restore carburetors, or finally fix that stubborn oil leak owe a piece of their knowledge to Edd China. Today, Workshop Diaries continues to grow, not with hype, but with heart. Edd isn't chasing ratings, he's chasing results. His episodes feel like conversations, not productions. His approach is personal, detailed, and above all, real. Behind the camera, he remains private. No tabloid scandals, no viral controversies. Just a man who loves machines and respects the people who share that love. And that quiet authenticity is what continues to draw fans to him, year after year. The story of Edd China isn't just about cars. It's about standing firm when compromise feels easy. It's about walking away from comfort to protect what you believe in. And for anyone who's ever chosen passion over popularity or substance over spectacle, Edd China remains more than a mechanic.
He's a symbol of what it means to stay true, no matter the cost. They built one of the most beloved car shows on television, a perfect blend of charm and skill. Mike Brewer was the deal maker, Edd China the mechanical genius. Together, they made Wheeler Dealers a global phenomenon. But in 2017, everything changed. Edd walked away from the show, leaving fans stunned and searching for answers. What followed was more than just a casting change. It was the unraveling of a friendship, a battle over creative control, and a fan base torn in two. While Edd pointed to behind-the-scenes interference and the loss of authentic content, Mike claimed he was blindsided. The internet exploded with rumors, accusations, and unanswered questions. Was Edd pushed out? Did Mike side with producers? And why haven't the two spoken since? The truth behind Edd China's departure and his quiet feud with Mike Brewer is far more painful than anyone expected. This is the real story of how a legendary partnership fell apart when the cameras weren't rolling. In 2003, Wheeler Dealers premiered on the Discovery Channel in the UK with modest expectations, but within just a few seasons, it became a global hit. At the heart of the show's unexpected success was a perfectly balanced duo. Mike Brewer, the fast-talking car trader with charisma and connections, and Edd China, the towering soft-spoken mechanic with brilliant hands and a mind for complex restorations. Together, they brought a chemistry that was as authentic as it was entertaining. Mike handled the buying, selling, and negotiations, the wheeling and dealing. He had the gift of the gab, a background in car sales, and a natural comfort in front of the camera. Edd, on the other hand, was the mechanical soul of the show. In a world full of fast-paced edits and flashy builds, Edd slowed things down. He explained every step, showed every bolt, and made complicated repairs look possible, even for viewers with zero experience. It was educational without being boring, and Edd's calm demeanor made him an instant fan favorite. Their formula was simple but revolutionary for its time, and sell it for a profit. No fake drama, no shouting matches, no staged breakdowns, just real cars, real repairs, and real numbers. Mike and Edd were never portrayed as rivals. They were teammates. Mike found the cars, Edd fixed them, and together they turned forgotten classics into beautiful machines. Viewers from around the world were drawn in, not just by the cars, but by the genuine respect and camaraderie between the two men. They didn't always agree, but they clearly trusted each other. And that dynamic made Wheeler Dealers more than just a car show. It was an automotive journey grounded in passion, craftsmanship, and a real partnership. But even in those early seasons, the seeds of future conflict were unknowingly being planted. Because while the show grew bigger and more commercial, the question was already starting to form. Could the creative spirit that built Wheeler Dealers survive the pressures of TV production? While Wheeler Dealers was built on the concept of buying and flipping used cars for profit, it was Edd China who gave the show its heart and its brains. From the moment he rolled up his sleeves in the original workshop, it was clear this wasn't a flashy reality TV mechanic. Edd was the real deal. Meticulous, thoughtful, and quietly brilliant, he brought a level of authenticity that few automotive shows ever attempted, let alone sustained. What made Edd stand out wasn't just his height or his iconic messy hair. It was his approach. Instead of glossing over mechanical issues, he dove deep. He would explain the inner workings of suspension systems, tackle complex electrical problems, and walk viewers through engine overhauls with clarity and patience. For aspiring mechanics, garage hobbyists, and curious viewers alike, Edd's segments were both masterclasses and confidence boosters. Edd didn't just fix cars, he taught the audience how to fix them. He respected the viewer's intelligence, never dumbing things down or skipping over the hard stuff, and that's what made him beloved. His garage segments were long, often detailed to a fault, but they were the very reason many tuned in week after week. His calm, problem-solving demeanor offered the perfect counterbalance to Mike Brewer's fast-talking energy. While Mike hustled the deals and navigated negotiations, Edd stayed grounded in the technical realities of the work. He ensured that Wheeler Dealers never strayed too far into entertainment and always stayed rooted in education. Fans didn't just like Edd, they trusted him, and that trust became the foundation of the show's credibility. Without him, many viewers believed the show would lose its soul. Unfortunately, as time went on, network executives had different ideas about what Wheeler Dealers should become, and Edd's insistence on doing things the right way would soon clash with their push for a more commercial formula. As Wheeler Dealers gained international success, its production shifted. In later seasons, the show came under the control of Discovery's US-based production arm, which saw an opportunity to repackage the content for a broader, more entertainment-focused audience. That shift brought in bigger budgets, flashier editing, and expanded marketing, but it also came with new priorities. Behind the scenes, Discovery reportedly began pushing for a format that placed more emphasis on the personalities and less on the process. In particular, they wanted to shorten Edd's repair segments, streamline the technical content, and focus more on the flip aspect of the show. Buy, gloss, sell. For longtime fans who loved the hands-on, educational aspect, this was a red flag. But for Edd, it was something worse, a compromise he wasn't willing to make. He voiced concerns early on. According to his later public statements, he strongly disagreed with the idea of cutting down the workshop scenes, especially when it meant removing the very parts of the show that taught viewers how to do real repairs. Edd argued that speeding up repairs would hurt the integrity of the series and alienate its core fan base. The network, however, had data on their side. Shorter segments meant tighter episodes. Tighter episodes meant more ad revenue. It was a classic conflict between creative integrity and commercial viability. And Edd, never one to chase the spotlight or bend to studio pressure, was increasingly isolated in his position. Mike, who had always acted as the show's frontman and businessman, found himself in a difficult spot. While Edd was pushing back, Mike was reportedly more open to the changes, either to keep the show afloat or to align with Discovery's broader goals. That difference in perspective marked a turning point in their partnership. The tension between content and commerce was no longer a slow burn. It was heading straight for a collision. As Discovery's influence grew behind the scenes, Mike Brewer found himself in a complex and controversial position. On one hand, he had built Wheeler Dealers from the ground up and remained committed to its success. On the other, he was now caught between a co-host who valued craftsmanship above all else and a network demanding a faster, flashier product. Some fans argue Mike was simply doing what he had to do to keep the show alive, adapting to the demands of television while trying to preserve as much of the original format as possible. After all, he wasn't a mechanic. His job was to make deals, move the story along, and ensure the show remained profitable. From that angle, Mike may have seen Edd's resistance as inflexible, even risky. But others believe Mike didn't just go along with the changes. He supported them, even if it meant marginalizing Edd. Behind the scenes, there were whispers that Mike had sided with the producers more than once, and that he had grown tired of Edd's unwillingness to compromise. Some claimed Mike had become too closely aligned with Discovery, prioritizing the show's brand and his own role over the original mission. The truth likely sits somewhere in the middle. Mike and Edd had always been very different personalities. Mike was the entertainer, the brand builder. Edd was the purist, the craftsman. Their differences had always complemented each other, until now, when those differences collided. Whether Mike was caught in the middle or consciously chose his path, his alignment with Discovery's vision put him on the opposite side of the creative divide. And while nothing explosive happened on camera, the silence between them grew louder behind the scenes. The final crack in the foundation was coming, and it would leave fans questioning not just the direction of the show, but the future of the friendship that made Wheeler Dealers great in the first place. On March 21, 2017, fans of Wheeler Dealers were blindsided. Edd China uploaded a YouTube video titled "Edd China on Leaving Wheeler Dealers," and the automotive world exploded. Calm and composed, Edd looked directly into the camera and explained, in his usual measured tone, that he would no longer be part of the show. But it wasn't the kind of friendly goodbye viewers were used to. Edd didn't mince words. He cited creative differences with the new U.S. production company as the core reason for his departure. Specifically, he took issue with the plan to cut down the in-depth workshop segments, the very thing that made Wheeler Dealers unique. Edd explained that removing detailed repairs would be a disservice to the fans, and said he could not, in good conscience, continue a version of the show that compromised its educational integrity. The reaction was immediate. Comments flooded in. Viewers around the world voiced support for Edd, praising his integrity and thanking him for years of hands-on instruction. Many blamed the network. Others blamed Mike Brewer directly, despite his absence from Edd's video. It wasn't just a cast change. It felt like the soul of the show had been ripped out. What made the moment even more shocking was how quietly it happened. There were no joint statements, no farewell episodes, no behind-the-scenes send-off. Just Edd, a camera, and the calm dismantling of a beloved partnership. Behind the grace of his delivery, fans sensed something deeper: frustration, disappointment, and a parting of ways that ran far deeper than creative differences alone. The departure left a vacuum, not just in the garage, but in the relationship that had once made Wheeler Dealers so universally loved. Just days after Edd's announcement, Mike Brewer released a public response, and it was raw. Visibly emotional, Mike claimed he was devastated by Edd's decision and insisted he hadn't wanted him to leave. According to Mike, Edd's video had taken him completely by surprise. He denied playing any role in pushing Edd out and suggested that Edd's messaging had unfairly shifted the blame onto him. But by then, the damage was done. Fans had already chosen sides. Social media erupted with outrage, and much of it was directed at Mike. Longtime viewers accused him of betraying Edd, selling out to Discovery, or failing to protect the integrity of the show. Hashtags like #Team Edd started trending. The comments on Mike's pages turned hostile, many demanding answers or apologies. Some even went further, sending death threats and abusive messages to Mike and his family. Mike, clearly rattled, made several emotional statements online and in interviews, saying the backlash was the worst abuse he'd ever received. He described how the attacks affected his wife and daughter, calling it a nightmare. He repeatedly denied being the reason for Edd's departure and asked fans to consider how much he had invested in the show, too. Despite his attempts to clarify the situation, Mike's reputation took a major hit. Where Edd's video had been calm and dignified, Mike's responses felt reactive and defensive. The contrast only fueled fan division. For many, it was no longer just a TV split. It was a war of values: authenticity versus commercialism, passion versus profit. The backlash marked a turning point. Whatever had happened between Edd and Mike behind the scenes, it was now painfully clear that the relationship had fractured, and there was no going back. Since that fateful split in 2017, one thing has remained constant: the silence between Edd China and Mike Brewer. There have been no reunions, no joint interviews, and not even the briefest public acknowledgement of each other in the years that followed. For two men who built over a decade of success together, the absence of communication speaks volumes. Edd, for his part, has taken the high road. He has never directly attacked Mike in public, nor has he divulged any personal details about their fallout. His statements remain focused on his reasons for leaving: creative integrity, production disagreements, and the desire to preserve the original spirit of Wheeler Dealers. But his silence on Mike's role has only fueled speculation. Was he being diplomatic? Or was he protecting something darker? Mike, meanwhile, has avoided talking about Edd altogether. After the initial storm died down, he returned to hosting Wheeler Dealers with new mechanics. First Ant Anstead, then Mark Priestley, but noticeably avoided comparing them to Edd. In fact, fans noted how rarely Edd's name came up at all, as though he had been quietly erased from the show's history. That absence has left a lingering unease. Fans still post regularly on forums and social media, asking if the two have made amends or will ever work together again. The answer, at least publicly, appears to be no. The silence feels like a wall, one built not out of hatred, but hurt. A slow, painful end to what was once one of the most genuine partnerships on automotive television. No fireworks, no final showdown, just an unresolved Cold War between two men who built something special and then walked away from it, separately. When the dust settled after Edd China's departure, both men took very different paths, each revealing more about who they were all along. For Edd, leaving Wheeler Dealers wasn't the end of his public presence. It was a new beginning. He launched his YouTube channel, Edd China's Garage Revival, returning to the kind of in-depth, educational content fans had always loved. His focus? Restoring cars while preserving the spirit of DIY enthusiasm and transparency that made him famous. Edd also explored new projects, including a prototype electric ice cream van, engineering challenges, and guest appearances at automotive events. His presence remained consistent with his identity: calm, inventive, and deeply rooted in the mechanical side of the craft. Though his content wasn't as frequent as a network-backed series, fans praised the authenticity and felt like Edd had returned to his roots. Mike Brewer, meanwhile, stayed in the wheeler-dealer's spotlight. The show continued on with new mechanics. First Ant Anstead, whose chemistry with Mike was praised, and then Mark Elvis Priestley, a former F1 mechanic. While the show carried on and introduced new viewers, many longtime fans felt something was missing. The banter, the balance, the trust. Edd's absence was still deeply felt. Though Mike stayed busy with spin-offs, live events, and dealership ventures, the shadow of Edd's departure loomed over him for years. Interviews about the show often avoided Edd's name entirely, and despite the show's ongoing evolution, the original magic never quite returned. In the aftermath, both men appeared to be thriving in their own ways, but the void between them never closed. And for fans, the show's golden era remained in the past, defined not by the cars, but by the unlikely friendship that once brought them to life. Years later, the wheeler-dealer's fan base remains fractured, divided into two passionate camps, Team Edd and Team Mike. And it's not just harmless internet banter. For many, it represents a deeper cultural divide between values in the car world. Purity of craft versus commercial pragmatism. Supporters of Edd argue that he was the soul of the show. They credit him with making wheeler-dealers educational, honest, and valuable beyond entertainment. For them, his departure marked the loss of what made the series different from every other reality car show. To this day, his fans flood social media with nostalgia clips, old episode rewatches, and ongoing calls for his return, even knowing it's unlikely. On the other side, Mike has retained a strong following, particularly among viewers who enjoy the fast-paced format, evolving production value, and variety of cars the show has tackled since Edd's exit. Many argue that Mike kept the show alive, adapted to industry changes, and carried on despite the immense pressure and backlash. They see him not as the villain, but as the survivor. Still, even neutral fans can't ignore how wheeler-dealers changed after 2017. The tone shifted. The warmth between hosts vanished. The educational depth was trimmed, and the sense of camaraderie felt scripted rather than earned. Even though both men have moved on, the fans haven't. Forums still spark with heated debates over what really happened. Reddit threads dissect interviews, YouTube comments speculate about silent grudges, and every time Edd posts a new video, someone inevitably asks, "Will you ever go back?" That divide remains a reminder of what wheeler-dealers once was, and what it lost. It's the question that refuses to fade. Will Edd China and Mike Brewer ever reunite? For years, fans have held out hope for a joint interview, a surprise cameo, or even a new show that brings the two back together. But as time stretches on, that possibility feels more and more like a fantasy. Publicly, neither man has shown interest in rekindling their working relationship. Edd continues to quietly innovate in his own lane, focused on creative freedom, independent projects, and staying true to the hands-on ethos that built his following. Mike, meanwhile, remains the face of wheeler-dealers, building new partnerships, hosting spin-offs, and embracing the polished entertainment model that now defines the show. Neither has thrown public punches since the fallout, but neither has extended an olive branch either. Their silence has become its own kind of closure, one that fans were never quite given. And yet, there's something undeniably tragic about how it ended. These weren't just co-workers, they were co-creators. They built something iconic together, a show that blended education, entertainment, and passion in a way few others ever have. And whether it was the pressure of production, a clash of values, or a betrayal never publicly aired, something broke, and neither of them has ever really explained it. If a reunion does come, it likely won't be on camera. It might be a private handshake behind the scenes. Or perhaps it won't come at all. Because sometimes, even the strongest partnerships dissolve, not in explosions, but in silence. But one thing is certain, Wheeler Dealers was never the same after Edd left. And the story of why remains one of the most compelling and heartbreaking chapters in automotive television history. You know Mike Brewer as the fast-talking host of Wheeler Dealers, a man always chasing the next big deal, always in the spotlight. But off camera, his life is a very different story. Tucked away in the English countryside, Brewer lives quietly with his wife Michelle in a home that reflects not fame, but function. His garage? Less showroom, more grease-stained workshop. His prized cars? Some are known, others kept hidden, like a custom Mustang built just for his wife. Behind the scenes, he's a passionate cook, a World War II history buff, and a night owl who still wrenches alone into the early morning hours. And while he appears confident on screen, Mike has battled burnout, public backlash, and even imposter syndrome. This isn't the story of a TV star, it's the story of the man behind the microphone. Welcome to the real Mike Brewer. Private, passionate, and far more complex than you ever imagined. To millions of viewers, Mike Brewer is a man constantly on the move, chasing deals, restoring classics, and cracking jokes in front of the camera. But when the lights go off and the cameras stop rolling, Mike retreats to a very different kind of life, one far from the noise and pressure of television. Brewer reportedly lives in a quiet, picturesque part of the English countryside, in a spacious yet modest home that perfectly reflects his personality. Practical, understated, and deeply rooted in passion. Unlike many TV personalities who flaunt sprawling mansions and modern palaces on social media, Mike keeps his home life private. Very few images of his house exist online. He doesn't do house tours or flashy real estate videos. That's because for Mike, home isn't a status symbol, it's a refuge. A place to reset, relax, and reconnect with what really matters. But perhaps the most impressive part of his home is what's behind the garage doors. While you might expect a showroom full of polished classics and framed awards, Brewer's personal garage is more of a working man's shop. Insiders and friends describe it as a functional, grease-stained space, cluttered with tools, parts, and projects in various states of completion. He doesn't treat the garage like a museum. It's where he gets his hands dirty. It's where he experiments, tinkers, and sometimes just wrenches to clear his head. On any given day, you might find a classic Mini stripped down on jack stands, a Land Rover mid-upgrade, or parts of an old 911 spread out like a mechanical puzzle waiting to be solved. This space, more than anything, represents the real Mike Brewer, the man who still finds joy in turning a wrench, who hasn't let TV change his roots, and who values authenticity over image. His home may not be plastered across social media, but to those who've seen it, it's clear. This is where the man behind the brand becomes just a car guy again, and he wouldn't have it any other way. While Mike Brewer is the public face of Wheeler Dealers, there's someone behind the scenes who's played a far more vital role than most fans realize. His wife, Michelle Brewer. The two have been married for over 2 decades, and in that time, Michelle has become the foundation of Mike's world, both emotionally and professionally. Unlike other reality TV couples Michelle has never craved the spotlight. She's appeared only briefly in a few episodes of Wheeler Dealers, and she rarely posts publicly. But don't mistake her low profile for a lack of involvement. Mike has often credited Michelle with helping him navigate the pressures of fame, from business decisions to public backlash. She has been the calm voice in his storm, the reason he didn't walk away when things got rough. When Edd China left Wheeler Dealers, the internet turned into a war zone. Fans lashed out, conspiracy theories spread, and Mike faced a wave of hate, including death threats and personal attacks. Behind the scenes, it was Michelle who helped him through it. She reportedly managed parts of the business, handled PR coordination, and, most importantly, reminded Mike of who he was before the cameras and criticism. In interviews, Mike has openly said Michelle is the reason he didn't quit. She's not just his wife, she's his partner in every sense of the word. From traveling with him on overseas shoots to helping with merchandise strategy, Michelle Brewer is deeply involved in the Wheeler Dealers ecosystem, just never out front. Fans may not know her well, but those who've worked with Mike say she's sharp, kind, and incredibly grounded. The perfect match for a man who often lives life in overdrive. And while Mike might be the one restoring cars on camera, Michelle is the one who's kept him from breaking down. Mike Brewer doesn't just talk about cars, he lives them. And when it comes to his personal garage, the man has built a collection that reflects both his deep appreciation for automotive history and his signature British taste. But what makes Brewer's fleet special isn't just the cars themselves, it's the stories behind them. At the center of his collection is a Porsche 911 Carrera, a car that Mike has called his therapy on wheels. Unlike many collectors who let their cars sit under covers, Mike drives his 911 regularly, through back roads, across the countryside, and even on the occasional filming trip. It's not a garage queen, it's part of his identity. Next come his classic Minis, multiple models, each with its own twist. Some are bone stock restorations, others modified to the edge. Mike has long had a soft spot for Minis, calling them the perfect British car, quirky, quick, and endlessly fun. These aren't just part of a collection, they're part of his past. He learned to drive in one. Then there's his rare TVR Griffith, a brutal British sports car known for being raw and unforgiving. And that's exactly why Mike loves it. It's the kind of car that punishes mistakes and rewards bravery. And it says a lot about Brewer's connection to old-school performance. For family adventures, he leans on a restored Land Rover Defender, a vehicle he had rebuilt from the ground up for road trips with Michelle and their daughter. It's rugged, classic, and built to last, much like Mike's career. And perhaps the most surprising? A custom 1960s Mustang built specifically for Michelle. It's never been shown on any show, never posted online. According to close sources, it was a gift, a private project that Brewer poured time and heart into just for her. It's easy to see Mike Brewer on TV and assume it's all talk. But one look at his garage tells the truth. This isn't a persona. This is who he is. While most people settle into bed after a long day, Mike Brewer heads into the garage. Those who know him best describe him as a night owl through and through, often staying up past midnight to tinker, wrench, or simply sit with his cars. It's not for content, it's not for show. It's his ritual, his escape, his way of staying connected to the machines that built his career. Inside his home garage, there's no production crew, no deadlines, no pressure. Just Mike, his toolbox, and whatever project has captured his imagination that week. Some nights, it's rebuilding a carburetor. Other times, it's cleaning parts or flipping through an old Haynes manual with a glass of whiskey nearby. The space is messy, real, and lived in. Not the kind of showroom you see on YouTube tours. According to close friends, Mike does some of his best thinking in the garage after dark. It's where episode ideas are scribbled down, business plans take shape, and stress from the public world melts away. The late-night hours are also when he reconnects with the why of it all: the cars, the builds, the community. There's something poetic about a man who has traveled the world for car shows, stood on major stages, and hosted international TV, still spending his nights elbows deep in an oily engine bay, listening to classic rock on a dusty Bluetooth speaker. These moments, the quiet hours between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., are when Mike Brewer becomes just Mike again. Not the host, not the brand, just a car guy with grease under his nails, chasing the same joy he felt as a teenager working on his first Mini. And that, more than any TV success, is what defines who he truly is. While Mike Brewer's upbeat persona and infectious energy have helped define wheeler dealers, behind the scenes, the pressure of fame nearly broke him. In the early seasons of the show, Brewer was not only hosting, he was also managing production demands, building the brand, traveling constantly, and trying to hold everything together. It eventually caught up with him. Few fans know that during the first few years of Wheeler Dealers, Mike battled severe burnout. The success came fast, and with it came mounting expectations from producers, from fans, and from the industry. Brewer later admitted that the stress got so bad, he seriously considered walking away from the show entirely after just 2 seasons. But it didn't stop there. When Edd China left the show in 2017, what should have been a standard cast change turned into a public nightmare. Brewer became the target of massive fan backlash. Forums exploded. Conspiracy theories ran wild. And Mike, the guy who had helped create the show from scratch, was suddenly villainized online. It got dark, really dark. Mike later revealed that he and his family received death threats, forcing him to hire security and take extended breaks from social media. Through it all, he kept working, filming, and putting on a brave face. But behind closed doors, he was drained. He leaned heavily on his wife, Michelle, during this time. According to Mike, she was the one who told him to hold the line, reminding him of the fans who still supported him and the mission they started together years before, to make car culture accessible and real. Today, Brewer reflects on that period as a defining chapter. It reminded him of why he started in the first place. Not for fame or headlines, but because he genuinely loves cars. And despite nearly quitting, he stayed the course and came out stronger. Beyond his love for cars, there's a side of Mike Brewer that most fans never get to see. A man of curious, passionate hobbies that have nothing to do with restoring classic vehicles. One of the most unexpected? Vintage aviation. Brewer is a huge fan of old warplanes, particularly World War II-era aircraft like the Spitfire and P-51 Mustang. He's taken flying lessons, attends air shows regularly, and even collects aviation memorabilia. According to those close to him, he's memorized the engine specs of dozens of vintage fighters, and his office is adorned with framed photos of legendary planes and pilots. His interest in history doesn't stop with aviation. Mike is also an avid collector of World War II memorabilia, including uniforms, medals, and rare wartime documents. He's fascinated by the stories of mechanics and engineers who worked in the shadows, the unsung builders of the war effort. In many ways, It mirrors his appreciation for craftsmen and unsung heroes in the automotive world. But perhaps the most surprising passion? Cooking. When Mike isn't under a hood or reading about bombers, he's often at the grill. He's known among close friends for throwing BBQ nights, smoking brisket, and perfecting slow-cooked ribs. Crew members from Wheeler Dealers have said some of their favorite memories weren't on set, but in Mike's backyard, with drinks in hand and the smell of wood smoke in the air. He's even joked about doing a cooking show just for fun, not for fame, but because feeding people is his love language. These lesser-known sides of Mike Brewer, the historian, the aviation geek, the pitmaster, remind fans that he's not just a presenter. He's a man of depth, curiosity, and surprising talents far beyond the garage. While Wheeler Dealers gave fans a front-row seat to hundreds of epic builds, not all of Mike Brewer's favorite projects ever made it to air. In fact, some of his most personal builds have remained completely hidden, kept private for reasons that go beyond ratings or resale. One such project is a custom 1960s Ford Mustang built entirely for his wife, Michelle. The build was never featured on the show, never posted online, and was reportedly completed in his home garage over several years. Friends say it was a passion project, a thank you car for all the years she supported his career behind the scenes. Finished in deep metallic blue with subtle performance upgrades, it's one of the most meaningful cars he's ever owned. Then there's the stripped-down Porsche 911 that Brewer has been slowly working on in secret, rebuilding it bolt by bolt without a production crew or timeline. It's his therapy project, where no one is watching, and every detail is done for personal satisfaction, not entertainment. He also has a vintage Mini Cooper that he keeps under wraps, not because it's rare, but because of what it represents. It was the first car he ever drove. Over the years, he's restored it, modified it, and even considered gifting it to his daughter one day. To Mike, it's more than a car. It's a piece of who he was before the spotlight. And recently, sources say Brewer's been working on a custom Cafe Racer motorcycle, another off-the-grid project built purely for joy. No sponsors, no deadlines, just wrenches and late nights. These unseen builds prove something important. Mike Brewer's love for cars isn't just content, it's personal. Even after years of television fame, he still builds for himself, in silence, in solitude, and often without anyone knowing. That's not just dedication, that's identity. Take away the cameras, the production schedules, and the international car shows. And what's left? According to those closest to him, Mike Brewer off-camera is even more genuine and down-to-earth than fans imagine. While his on-screen energy is big and bold, in real life he's often described as laid-back, thoughtful, and surprisingly private. Crew members and colleagues consistently say the same thing. What you see on screen is Mike, but it's only one side. Off-set, he's known to check in on people, crack dad jokes, and make time for everyone from young fans to stagehands. Despite years in the limelight, he's never become standoffish or inaccessible. One thing people often notice is how much time Mike gives to up-and-coming mechanics and small business owners. At industry events, he doesn't just do photo ops and move on. He listens, offers advice, and even helps connect young builders to opportunities. Several shop owners in the UK and US have credited Mike with giving them their first big break, quietly and without asking for credit. Then there's his quiet, philanthropic work. Mike doesn't blast it on social media, but he's donated time, money, and vehicles to various charities, especially causes related to veterans and vocational education. Whether it's supporting wounded soldier foundations or sponsoring students in automotive training programs, he gives back in ways fans rarely hear about. Even when he's just out driving, fans report that Mike is always approachable. No entourage, no attitude, just a guy who's happy to talk about cars with anyone who shares the same passion. If anything, his real-life personality is proof that success hasn't changed him. Because when the cameras are off, Mike Brewer is still a car guy, but more importantly, he's still a people guy. After decades of hosting wheeler dealers, traveling the globe, restoring cars, and navigating controversy, what keeps Mike Brewer moving forward? According to Mike himself, it's not the fame or the money, it's connection. Connection to the cars, the people, and the purpose behind it all. He's been candid in interviews about experiencing imposter syndrome, especially in the early days when critics dismissed him as just a presenter and not a real car guy. That stuck with him. It made him work harder, study more, get under the hood more often. And today, he's proud to say he's earned his place, not by shouting, but by showing up again and again, and learning every step of the way. These days, Mike chooses projects and appearances more carefully. He's not chasing exposure, he's chasing meaning. Whether it's filming a limited series, collaborating with builders he respects, or returning to classic car events across Europe, he's more intentional now than ever before. His family also remains central. Though he keeps them largely out of the public eye, Mike has spoken warmly about his daughter, calling her his greatest accomplishment and a constant reminder of what matters most. He's even hinted that he'd love to one day pass down a few of his cars, not for legacy, but for the memories they hold. Mike also says he's motivated by the next generation of enthusiasts. He sees the car world changing, growing younger, more diverse, and he wants to be part of that evolution. He's not clinging to the past. He's inviting the future in. At the heart of it all is a simple drive to keep telling stories, keep turning wrenches, and keep making car culture accessible to everyone, one build at a time. To the outside world, Mike Brewer is a TV host, car dealer, and brand ambassador. But peel back the curtain, and you'll find a man who has spent decades balancing fame with humility, business with burnout, and spotlight with solitude. His life off camera is remarkably human, filled with quiet moments in the garage, BBQs with friends, history books on the shelf, and secret projects built not for an audience, but for the soul. He's not perfect. He's faced backlash, made tough decisions, and carried the weight of criticism. But through it all, he's stayed authentic. Mike doesn't chase controversy. He doesn't brag about his wealth. He's built a life that reflects his roots. Honest, hardworking, and hands-on. Whether it's his wife Michelle supporting him from behind the scenes, or his late-night solo builds that no one ever sees, every detail of his private world reveals a man driven more by passion than performance. In an age where so many television personalities are obsessed with staying relevant, Mike Brewer has quietly stayed real. And that's what makes him relevant. He's proof that you can survive the spotlight without losing yourself in it. That you can build an empire and still turn a wrench just for fun. And that success, at its best, is something you live, not something you flaunt. So, the next time you watch an episode of Wheeler Dealers, remember, there's more to the man behind the mic. Behind every car flip and cheeky grin is a life shaped by love, loss, long nights, and quiet victories. This is Mike Brewer. Off the clock, off the script, and more authentic than ever. He walked away from one of the biggest car shows in the world and vanished into his own garage. Years later, someone opened the doors to Edd China's workshop, and inside was something no one expected. A half-finished invention, an idea ahead of its time, and a project that might have changed wheeler dealers forever. When Edd China left Wheeler Dealers in 2017, it didn't feel like a TV announcement. It felt like a funeral. Millions of viewers tuned in expecting more restorations, more wisdom, more calm explanations in front of half-finished dashboards. Instead, they got a shock. The show's tall, soft-spoken, and unmistakably brilliant co-host was gone. And the reason? A quiet but sharp creative divide that had been building behind the scenes for years. Edd had always been the soul of Wheeler Dealers, the mechanical anchor to Mike Brewer's fast-talking salesmanship. While Brewer haggled, Edd solved problems. While the show moved faster, Edd slowed it down to explain why a seized caliper wasn't just a fix. It was a lesson. But when the network brought in new producers, the tone shifted. Time-saving edits took priority over technical breakdowns. Too many spanners, they reportedly said. Edd pushed back. He believed the show had a responsibility, not just to entertain, but to teach, to demystify repairs, to give car lovers real, useful knowledge. But producers wanted speed, simplicity, more polish, less process. The friction became final when Edd refused to reduce the workshop segments to bite-sized cuts. Rather than compromise the integrity of his work, he walked. He made the announcement himself, alone, sitting in front of a GoPro, in what looked like a cluttered garage office. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't bitter. It was Edd, honest, quiet, dignified. And then he disappeared. No new show, no public appearances, no grand tour. He vanished into his own space, out of the spotlight, out of the headlines, and straight into the one place no one could reach, his workshop. What no one realized at the time was that he didn't just leave a show. He was already building something else, something no one expected. After stepping away from Wheeler Dealers, Edd China didn't line up another network gig or launch a flashy new show. He simply vanished. A few interviews, some cryptic YouTube uploads, but nothing steady. No big announcements, no full-time return, just silence and speculation. Fans flooded forums asking where he'd gone. Rumors swirled. Some said he moved to the countryside. Others claimed he was consulting on EVs in secret. But those close to him knew the truth. Edd had gone back to the one place where the pressure disappeared, his workshop. It wasn't a studio. It wasn't for show. It was where Edd could breathe. A cavern of unfinished machines, scattered blueprints, antique tools, and experimental parts. For most people, it would look like chaos. But to Edd, it was freedom. He was finally off the leash. No deadlines, no creative interference, no cameras dissecting every word. Just a man, his mind, and his machines. There were no scripts to follow, no episodes to complete. If something took a week or a year, it didn't matter. The silence gave him room to think again, really think. And that's when it started. The project that would come to define everything he'd kept to himself during his final years on TV. He didn't name it at first, just called it The Conversion. A quiet experiment, just a chassis on jack stands. But it became an obsession, a restoration project that wasn't about resale value, but vision, a test of what could be possible when no one else was telling him what to do. And deep in that workshop, under dust and wires, a revolution was slowly taking shape. One that didn't need an audience, just time. Long before the mainstream caught up, Edd China was already looking past petrol. While others were restoring V8s and tuning turbos, Edd was asking different questions. What if classic cars could be green? What if you could keep the soul of a vintage machine, but give it a silent heart? It wasn't about following a trend, it was about future-proofing a passion. His obsession with sustainability wasn't just talk. During his wheeler-dealer's years, Edd toyed with biofuels, converted vehicles for efficiency, and even designed electric furniture cars just to challenge the way people thought about motion. But those ideas rarely made it to air. The show was about flipping classics, not rewriting them. And when he suggested EV conversions or hybrid builds, the response was always the same. Too risky, too complicated, not what our viewers want. So Edd waited, patiently, quietly. And once the spotlight dimmed, he didn't walk away from the idea. He doubled down. The workshop became his lab. Shelves filled with salvaged battery packs, electric motors, regenerative braking prototypes. His whiteboards turned into spider webs of diagrams, fusing old-school chassis layouts with next-gen powertrains. To him, this wasn't an experiment. It was inevitable. The auto world was changing, and Edd didn't want to be part of the past. He wanted to build a bridge between eras, to show that a car didn't need petrol to have a heartbeat, that torque could be silent and still thrilling. And so the project began. Not for fans, not for producers, but for the future Edd knew was coming, long before anyone else did. In the far corner of his workshop, under a canvas sheet and years of dust, sat a shell of a classic Mini. A British icon, small, efficient, beloved. But to Edd, it wasn't just a relic. It was a blank canvas. He didn't just want to restore it, he wanted to reimagine it. He stripped it down completely. Body off the frame, interior gutted, drivetrain removed. What went back in wasn't what anyone expected. No internal combustion, no gearbox. Instead, Edd designed a fully modular electric drive system, complete with swappable battery packs, regenerative braking, and a digital control hub hidden inside the dash. The idea? Build a usable, affordable EV platform that could be adapted to other classics without changing their DNA. He didn't give it a flashy name. He called it Project X in his notes, part out of mystery, part out of irony. Because he wasn't building this for approval. He was building it because no one else would. Each night, he returned to the build, tinkering with motor mounts, testing voltage curves, updating sketches. He even 3D printed certain brackets when off-the-shelf options didn't fit. His vision was bold but simple. A Mini that looked stock, but drove like the future. Friends who visited the shop said the car wasn't just different. It was alive, silent, sleek, and oddly spiritual. Like a ghost of the past possessed by something new. But as the project took shape, Edd faced the truth. No show would air it. No sponsor would back it. And that meant Project X would live, or die, in silence. Despite the innovation happening behind closed doors, Project X never made it to television. Not a single frame. Not even a whisper of it on wheeler dealers. And for fans who only saw Edd China through the lens of the show, the electric Mini never existed. But behind the scenes, there was real interest. At first, Edd had pitched the idea quietly. A classic car converted to electric, done right. Not a gimmick, but a proof of concept that EV tech and restoration could live in harmony. He imagined an episode where viewers learned how to convert their own cars step by step. Not some hyper-modern Tesla clone, but a soulful EV with character and retro charm. The potential was massive, but the reaction from producers and sponsors was cold. Too niche, too expensive. Our audience doesn't want electric. Edd was told it would confuse viewers, that it wasn't on-brand. The network had already chosen its path. Fast flips, big reveals, petrol power. EVs didn't fit that formula. The marketing department didn't like it. The sponsors didn't see dollar signs. So the project was shelved, politely, but firmly. Edd was gutted. He'd always played the long game. He didn't mind being patient. But this was different. This was the future being rejected before it had a chance to prove itself. So rather than fight a losing battle, he quietly let the pitch go. He never mentioned it on air again, never brought it up in interviews. And behind the scenes, he stopped pushing. But he didn't stop building. Because even if the world wasn't ready to see Project X, he wasn't ready to let it go. Years passed. The show moved on. New hosts came in. Edd drifted further from the public eye. While fans followed him through workshop diaries and his eccentric builds, like the electric ice cream van or the world's fastest motorized couch, Project X remained hidden, half-covered, unfinished, untouched, until someone found it again. It happened when a former colleague was helping organize Edd's old workshop space. What was supposed to be a cleanup day turned into a time capsule discovery. In the back corner, underneath a dusty canvas, sat the Mini, frozen in time. The tires were low. The custom battery boxes had yellowed slightly. Exposed wiring snaked across the floor, but the shell was still intact. The vision, still unmistakable. At first glance, it looked like a forgotten build, but as the dust cleared, details began to emerge. Handwritten labels, custom mounts, brackets 3D printed with Edd's initials. Inside the cabin, the dashboard had been redesigned to house a touchscreen interface. Not a flashy aftermarket tablet, something built from scratch, integrated with the car's internals. On the workbench nearby were notes, notebooks filled with sketches, torque specs, voltage readings, and component testing logs. It became clear that Project X hadn't been abandoned. It had been paused, left in limbo while the rest of the world caught up. But one page in particular stood out, and it changed everything about what this build truly meant. Among the neatly stacked notebooks was a single page, loose, faded at the edges, and marked in heavy black ink. At the top, in Edd's signature handwriting, were the words, "They'll never let me build this on air." Below it, a hand-drawn schematic of the Mini's undercarriage, battery placement, motor housing, and regenerative system layout. But this wasn't just technical scribbling. It was frustration poured onto paper. Arrows pointed to where the production team wanted to cut time. Notes mentioned segments removed and build details stripped. It was clear. Edd hadn't just been blocked. He'd been silenced. Other diagrams showed possible variations, a modular kit design that could be replicated. He was planning not just one build, but a system. Something open source. Something that classic car enthusiasts around the world could download, fabricate, and install. Not a prototype, a movement. And yet, he walked away from it. Not because it didn't work, but because the platform he once trusted had no room for it. That note wasn't dramatic. It was honest. A quiet surrender from someone who had always chosen integrity over applause. To anyone else, it might have looked like failure. But to those who read between the lines, it was proof. Proof that Edd China wasn't just building a car, He was challenging an entire system, and that system simply wasn't ready. The discovery of Project X sparked an uncomfortable question, one that fans still debate today. What if Edd China had been allowed to finish it? Could it have changed the course of Wheeler Dealers? Could it have saved the show from the creative rift that ultimately drove him out? Imagine it, an episode where a classic Mini doesn't just get restored, but reimagined. Where viewers learn how to preserve their favorite cars without sacrificing their future. Edd walks them through the process. Battery selection, regenerative braking setup, interface calibration. It's still a build, still hands-on, still unmistakably Edd, but it's forward-facing. It bridges nostalgia with innovation. Producers feared the audience wouldn't accept it, but the world changed faster than they predicted. By the early 2020s, EV conversions were trending. YouTubers were building Teslas into Beetles. Porsche 911s were going electric in private garages. There was a hunger for knowledge. And Wheeler Dealers, a show built on accessible expertise, missed the moment. Had Edd stayed? Could the series have evolved? Could it have kept its original fan base while inviting in a new one? Could it have remained educational, meaningful, and necessary? We'll never know for sure. But what we do know is this. Edd saw the shift coming before almost anyone, and instead of chasing views, he chased vision, quietly. In a workshop the world forgot. And now that we've seen what he left behind, the question isn't whether the show could have changed. It's whether it ever deserved what he tried to give it. Project X never made it to air. It never got a reveal. There was no slow-motion beauty shot, no final polish, no triumphant test drive. To most of the world, it doesn't even exist. But that might be what makes it matter more. Because sometimes, the most meaningful projects aren't the ones that get finished. They're the ones that say something before they're even done. Project X is a perfect example. It showed what Edd China was always about, even when he wasn't allowed to say it out loud. Innovation without ego, engineering with conscience, passion without compromise. It didn't need a platform. It didn't need fanfare. It existed because it had to. Because when you're a builder at heart, the work doesn't stop just because the camera does. In a way, Project X became a symbol of what Wheeler Dealers could have evolved into, of what Edd tried to build behind the scenes, and of what happens when creative control gets in the way of progress. Fans who've heard the story now look at Edd differently. Not just as the guy with the orange gloves, but as a pioneer. Someone who stayed ahead of the curve, even if it meant walking alone. And though Project X sits unfinished, its message is crystal clear. Don't wait for permission to build something that matters. Because sometimes, the legacy isn't the car. It's the courage to imagine what it could have become. Today, Edd China continues to follow his own path, less televised, more intentional. Through workshop diaries, through speaking gigs, books, and bizarre mechanical creations, he still shares what made him a fan favorite in the first place. His brain, his calm, his relentless curiosity. He's no longer confined by format. No producers hovering, no runtime limits. He builds what he wants, when he wants, and if the public tunes in, great. If not, he's still building, still inventing, still proving that the real joy comes not from attention, but from the act of creation itself. Project X remains untouched, still in that garage, still wearing dust like a badge. And while Edd hasn't confirmed whether he'll finish it, fans continue to wonder, will it ever roll again? Or is its true purpose already fulfilled? Because in many ways, it already did what it was meant to. It reminded the world who Edd China really is, Not just a TV personality, but a builder, a thinker, a mechanic with principles, and a man who would rather walk away from a global hit show than compromise what he believes good engineering should be. He didn't need the spotlight. He didn't need the credit. He just needed the space to build something better. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the world needs more of. Fewer loud reveals and more quiet revolutions. What really split them apart? In 2003, Wheeler dealers hit British television screens with a simple yet brilliant formula. Buy a cheap used car, fix it up, and sell it for a modest profit. But what made the show instantly addictive wasn't just the premise, it was the chemistry. Mike Brewer, a fast-talking, wheeling and dealing car trader, brought the charm and business savvy. Edd China, the towering, soft-spoken mechanical genius with unkempt hair and oil-stained hands, brought the brain. Together, they didn't just flip cars, they flipped the script on what car television could be. At a time when most car shows were more about drama and explosions than knowledge, Wheeler Dealers was refreshing. It offered real education. Edd didn't just say a part needed replacing, he explained why. He tore down engines, rebuilt gearboxes, and made it accessible for viewers who had never held a wrench. Meanwhile, Mike would track down solid but overlooked cars, bargain with sellers, and add just enough tension to make the negotiation scenes feel like small thrillers. It was entertaining, informative, and authentic. The duo quickly became a staple in the homes of gearheads around the world. As the show grew, so did their reputations. Mike as a slick presenter with an eye for deals, Edd as the meticulous engineer who could save even the rustiest wreck. Their personalities couldn't have been more different, yet they complemented each other perfectly. What started as a low-budget car show for a niche audience soon exploded into a global phenomenon, syndicated in over 100 countries. Fans didn't just watch the builds. They felt like they were in the garage, learning alongside two very different but equally passionate car lovers. For over a decade, Mike and Edd seemed inseparable. But even the best partnerships are fragile. And as we'll discover, what looked perfect on screen was hiding some serious cracks behind the scenes. By the late 2000s, Wheeler Dealers had become more than just a successful British car show. It was an international brand. The formula that started modestly in the UK had found global appeal, a balance of banter, budget builds, and educational content. Mike Brewer's ability to track down quirky, undervalued classics, and Edd China's methodical, detail-driven repair work captivated car enthusiasts in over 100 countries. Viewers in Australia, the US, and across Europe became deeply invested in the duo's dynamic and the journey each vehicle took from junk to joyride. But with that success came pressure. More episodes, bigger builds, a growing demand for tighter deadlines and higher stakes. The show's structure evolved. What was once a 30-minute segment in a small UK garage turned into a full production set with a growing crew and higher production value. Cars got rarer. Repairs became more intricate. The audience expected to be amazed, and Mike and Edd had to keep delivering. Edd became the breakout technical star of the series. While Mike handled the wheeling and dealing with charisma, it was Edd who earned a cult-like following for his clear, methodical explanations and calm demeanor. Whether rebuilding a carburetor or fabricating a part from scratch, he wasn't just doing the work. He was teaching the audience how to do it too. His segments turned Wheeler Dealers into more than just entertainment. It became a kind of rolling masterclass in classic car restoration. Fans noticed the authenticity, and they responded with loyalty. Online forums buzzed with speculation about future builds, debates about restoration techniques, and a deep respect for Edd's integrity. Together, Mike and Edd had created something rare, a show that felt like it respected its audience's intelligence. But behind the cameras, that success came with creative tension. And it wasn't long before the cracks in the polished veneers started to show. Cracks that no amount of editing could fully hide. While Wheeler Dealers continued to dominate ratings, the tension between its two stars slowly began to mount behind the scenes. The success of the show brought bigger budgets, more ambitious builds, and new demands from production. But it also brought creative differences, especially between Edd China and the producers, and eventually between Edd and Mike. Edd had always been the show's technical foundation, and with each passing season, he pushed for more in-depth explanations and authentic restorations. He believed that every nut, bolt, and weld should be shown, because that's what real enthusiasts wanted. To Edd, skipping over key repairs for the sake of time or pacing felt like betraying the audience. But as the show expanded into new markets, especially the US, network executives began to demand a faster, flashier edit. They wanted more car reveals and less under-the-hood content. The producers leaned toward Mike's vision: shorter repair scenes, tighter episodes, more sizzle. Mike, for his part, wasn't trying to dumb the show down. He was adapting to the changing landscape of television. He saw Wheeler Dealers not just as a workshop, but as a product that had to appeal to a wide audience, gearheads and casual viewers alike. But to Edd, this shift felt like a compromise too far. The essence of the show, the educational soul, was being chipped away, one shortcut at a time. Privately, frustrations began to build. Edd grew weary of having to defend the time it took to properly explain complex procedures. He wasn't being difficult, he was being principled. But in the high-speed world of TV production, principles can feel like obstacles. The friction didn't result in explosive arguments or dramatic walkouts. It was quieter than that, a slow, uncomfortable drift between two men who once shared the same vision. And just as things reached a boiling point, a new player entered the garage and changed everything. In 2016, Wheeler Dealers made a major leap. It was picked up by Discovery's Velocity channel in the United States. It was a huge opportunity, opening the door to a broader audience, bigger budgets, and primetime exposure in the American market. But with the upgrade came a shift in creative control. Velocity wanted the show streamlined, slicker, and faster-paced. The raw, educational spirit that Edd had built his reputation on was suddenly seen as too slow for modern audiences. Executives from the network reportedly pushed for a different format. The repair segments, once the heart of each episode, were to be shortened significantly. Less process, more polish. Less teaching, more selling. Edd pushed back hard. He argued that viewers loved the authenticity, the problem-solving, the detailed walkthroughs. He warned that removing those segments would reduce the show to just another glossy flip series. But Velocity was adamant. In their eyes, Edd's approach was too technical, and they felt it was holding the series back from broader appeal. The decision wasn't just about edits. It reflected a deeper philosophical clash between the network's desire for mass-market entertainment and Edd's insistence on mechanical integrity. Mike, caught in the middle, sided with the network's direction. He had always been the businessman, the negotiator. He understood that compromises were necessary to keep the show alive and evolving. But to Edd, that compromise felt like a betrayal of everything they'd built. He wasn't angry at Mike personally, but it was clear their paths were no longer aligned. It wasn't just a creative disagreement, it was an inflection point. Edd was being asked to stop being who he was in order to keep doing what he loved. And for a man who had built his career on integrity, that was one line he wouldn't cross. The next move would send shockwaves through the automotive TV world and change the future of wheeler dealers forever. In March 2017, Edd China released a calm but powerful video on YouTube that left millions stunned. With no warning from the network or the show itself, Edd announced he was leaving Wheeler Dealers. His reason? He didn't agree with the creative direction the show was taking, especially the decision to cut down the workshop segments, which he believed were the backbone of the program. In his words, he felt continuing would compromise his integrity as both an engineer and an educator. The response was seismic. The internet lit up. Longtime fans were heartbroken and angry. Within hours, the blame game began. Many pointed fingers directly at the network, but a large portion of the audience turned their attention to Mike Brewer. As the on-screen partner who stayed behind, some assumed Mike had either forced Edd out or betrayed him by siding with producers. And just like that, the carefully built image of the dynamic duo was fractured. For Edd, it was never about personal drama. He kept his message professional, never naming names or attacking Mike directly. But between the lines, the message was clear. This wasn't a mutual decision. It was a stand against dilution, against making car restoration into just another reality show. Edd had spent 13 years turning Wheeler Dealers into a respected platform for automotive knowledge. And when that mission was no longer possible, he chose to walk. Behind the scenes, the network scrambled to control the fallout. Press releases were vague. Producers thanked Edd for his time and expressed excitement about the show's new direction. But no amount of PR could silence the reaction. Fans felt blindsided. Forums filled with angry posts. Hashtags calling for Edd's return trended across social media. It wasn't just the end of a co-hosting gig, it was the end of an era. And for many fans, Wheeler Dealers would never feel the same again. While Edd walked away with his principles intact, Mike Brewer stayed and walked straight into a firestorm. The backlash was fast, brutal, and deeply personal. Social media turned toxic. Rumors spread like wildfire. And within days, Mike and his family were receiving online abuse, threats, and messages blaming him for pushing Edd out. Mike responded emotionally and defensively. He insisted he wasn't behind the changes and that he didn't force Edd to leave. In interviews, he called the fan reaction cruel and described receiving death threats. "People think we were best friends," he said. "But this was a professional relationship, and I didn't make the decision for him to leave." Still, many fans didn't buy it. To some viewers, Mike had become the face of corporate compromise, the guy who stayed while the real car guy took a stand. But the truth was far more complicated. Mike had always been the salesman, the deal maker, the showman. He knew the business side of TV and understood the pressure to evolve. He likely didn't agree with everything the network wanted either. But unlike Edd, he was willing to play the game. Caught in the middle, Mike tried to defend both his reputation and the future of the show. He reassured fans that Wheeler Dealers would go on, and that the new format would still honor the spirit of the series. But the trust had already cracked. What hurt the most, according to Mike, wasn't the professional criticism. It was the personal attacks. He and Edd had worked together for over a decade. They weren't best friends off camera, but they shared something few people do. Years of building something beloved. And now, it felt like the audience had chosen sides, and he was on the wrong one. For the first time, the dealmaker couldn't close the gap. Not with fans, not with Edd, not with himself. As the dust settled, a deeper question began to surface. Was Edd China truly the one who chose to leave Wheeler Dealers? Or was he pushed out by a network more interested in ratings than restoration? Officially, the Velocity Channel, now Motor Trend, framed the split as amicable. They thanked Edd for his years of service and welcomed his replacement with open arms. But fans weren't convinced. Whispers began to circulate. Some claimed Edd had been branded difficult behind the scenes. Others believed producers saw him as a bottleneck, someone who slowed production with his insistence on showing every repair in detail. And when the show moved to the US, many suspected the network had been looking for a more TV-friendly format all along. The biggest clue? The show's post-Edd reboot. With his exit, the technical segments were dramatically shortened. Repairs were breezed through in quick cuts. The educational deep dives were gone. It wasn't the same show, and that, fans argued, proved Edd's point. This wasn't about creative differences, it was a forced evolution, one Edd refused to accept. Mike, meanwhile, continued to deny that Edd was forced out. In multiple interviews, he said he fought to keep the show together, but the narrative had already taken hold. For many viewers, Edd was the martyr, Mike was the company man, and the network was the villain. Even today, no one has offered a definitive account of what happened behind closed doors. Edd remained diplomatic. Mike stayed defensive. The network stayed silent. And so, the speculation never stopped. But one thing was clear. When Edd China left the garage, he didn't just exit a TV show. He sparked one of the biggest controversies in automotive television history and left behind questions that would never be fully answered. After the split, both Edd China and Mike Brewer charted new, very different paths. Edd, always the innovator and educator, didn't wait long to reconnect with fans. In 2018, he launched his YouTube series, Edd China's Garage Revival, which focused on helping real people finish abandoned restoration projects. It wasn't flashy, but it was honest and true to his mechanical roots. Fans praised the authenticity and celebrated having the real Edd back on screen, unfiltered and unedited. Edd also published his memoir, Grease Junkie, a deeply personal book that offered more insight into his life, philosophy, and even his time on Wheeler Dealers. While he didn't spill every behind-the-scenes detail, he made it clear. Quality and integrity will always come before fame. He remains active online, posting updates, experimenting with electric conversions, and quietly inspiring a new generation of gearheads who value knowledge over drama. Mike Brewer, on the other hand, stayed the course. Wheeler Dealers continued, with Aunt Anstead stepping into Edd's place as mechanic. The chemistry was different, more polished, but still successful. Ant brought a new dynamic, and later, Mark Elvis Priestley continued the baton. Mike kept the franchise alive, traveling the world to find rare cars and keep the format fresh. But no matter how much success he's had since, he's never truly escaped the shadow of the split. Nearly every interview still brings up Edd. The fans never forgot. The roads they chose reflected who they were at their core. Edd, the craftsman. Mike, the showman. And while both found new ways to thrive, the magic of what they had together remains unmatched. Even years later, the split between Edd China and Mike Brewer still stirs emotions. Fans didn't just lose a show format, they lost a connection. Wheeler Dealers was more than just a car show. It was comfort. It was two opposites working in harmony, teaching and entertaining without pretension. When that balance was broken, something in the car community fractured. Comments still flood both Edd's and Mike's social media accounts. Bring back Edd. It's not the same. I stopped watching after you left. The loyalty to that original duo runs deep. It wasn't about the builds or the profits. It was about the bond. Viewers felt like they were in the garage too, learning, laughing, and witnessing a true partnership. The show tried to move on, but for many, the chemistry was irreplaceable. Mike's new co-hosts were capable, talented even, but they weren't Edd, and that comparison haunted every episode that followed. Viewers longed for the moments where Edd would fix something with quiet brilliance while Mike haggled for parts. The formula was simple, and it worked. Fan forums and Reddit threads still debate the truth of what happened. Some hold out hope for a reunion, even if it's just a one-off build. Others accept that too much damage was done. But what's undeniable is the lasting legacy they created together. In the car world, partnerships come and go. Shops close. Shows end. But the split between Edd and Mike wasn't just a career move. It was a cultural shift. And to this day, millions still wish they could go back and watch just one more car get saved. The old way. Edd China and Mike Brewer may have gone their separate ways, but together, they changed automotive television forever. Their unlikely chemistry, Edd's technical wizardry, and Mike's wheeling and dealing charm struck a chord that few other shows have matched. They made classic car restoration accessible, entertaining, and, most importantly, authentic. The legacy they leave behind isn't just a catalog of restored classics or global TV ratings. It's a standard. A bar that every car show since has tried, and often failed, to reach. They didn't rely on manufactured drama or over-the-top gimmicks. They relied on passion, skill, and a genuine love for cars. Their split revealed how fragile creative partnerships can be. When business interests, network demands, and personal principles collide, something has to give. For Edd, that meant walking away to protect what mattered most to him. For Mike, it meant staying to keep the dream alive, even if it meant walking alone. Together, they showed us that real craftsmanship matters, that entertainment can still be educational, and that the garage, when treated with care, can be a place of magic. The cars they saved will live on, but more importantly, so will the example they set. In the end, maybe that's the most lasting impact of their time on wheeler dealers. They didn't just build cars, they built memories. They reminded us what's possible when two people from totally different worlds come together for something they both believe in. The wrench, the deal, the dream. Even if they never share the same garage again, their story is parked permanently in the hearts of gearheads everywhere. When Ant Anstead stepped into Wheeler Dealers in 2017, he wasn't just joining a show, he was stepping into a legacy. Edd China's departure had left fans reeling. The original duo had chemistry, rhythm, and a trusted formula. Now, Discovery needed to keep the show alive, and Ant was the man they picked to do it. At first, the internet roared with skepticism. Who was this new guy? Could he wrench like Edd? Could he bond with Mike Brewer the same way? But then, something surprising happened. Ant Anstead didn't just fill the role, he reshaped it. A former police officer turned car builder, Ant brought with him an easy charm, deep technical knowledge, and a camera-friendly personality that clicked fast. He had a way of making complex mechanical work feel elegant. Where Edd was quirky and technical, Ant was clean-cut and design-forward. He didn't just fix cars, he refined them. Viewers slowly came around. Ant's workshop segments were detailed and passionate. His design sense was fresh, and the cars looked better than ever. Brewer played his usual role, the deal-maker, the host, the mouthpiece of the brand. But for the first time, fans noticed something strange. Ant was doing a lot more than just fixing cars. Behind the scenes, he was rebuilding engines, sourcing parts, and handling massive fabrication jobs. The partnership felt a bit uneven. On camera, things looked smooth. But insiders say from day one, Ant carried a heavier load than the show ever revealed. And while the new duo won praise, pressure was already building behind the shop doors. On screen, Wheeler Dealers kept its classic rhythm. Mike Brewer hunted down the vehicle. Ant brought it back to life. But behind the polished edits was a widening gap. While Mike's segments were filmed quickly, often in just a few hours, Ant spent days on the mechanical work. Engine rebuilds, transmission swaps, suspension overhauls. Ant didn't just demo steps. He did the entire job. And more often than not, alone. Production insiders later confirmed what fans had suspected. Mike's role was front-facing, hosting, negotiating, moving the show along. Ant, meanwhile, was deep in the grit. Late nights, busted knuckles, problem-solving when parts didn't fit. It was more than a show. It was a grind. And the imbalance started to show. There were subtle signs. In interviews, Ant would praise the crew, talk about his work, and barely mention Mike. In contrast, Mike remained the loudest voice in promotional material, attending fan events, doing press, and appearing solo on panel circuits. It wasn't personal. It was branding. Mike was Wheeler Dealers. Ant? Just another mechanic filling Ed's shoes. At least, that's how some producers saw it. That unspoken hierarchy began to eat away at the chemistry. Ant didn't want celebrity. He wanted respect for the craft. But every episode he carried, every flawless restoration he pulled off, just fed the machine. And Mike still took the spotlight. And when Ant looked around for credit, all he saw was silence. Even before Ant turned his first wrench on Wheeler Dealers, the comparisons started. He's not Edd China. Bring Edd back. This new guy doesn't have the same soul. Every forum, every comment section, every YouTube clip came with an echo of Edd's legacy. Ant wasn't just a host, he was a replacement, and the fans made sure he never forgot it. That kind of pressure is invisible on TV, but it's heavy behind the curtain. Every creative choice Ant made, from interior materials to design tweaks, got dissected online. Edd wouldn't have done this. Edd wouldn't have used that. But Ant wasn't trying to be Edd. He had his own style. More refined, more modern, more sleek. He built with an eye for design, often blending form and function. Yet, despite the incredible work he was doing, he was trapped in someone else's shadow. It wasn't just about fandom. The tension leaked into production. Crew members were divided. Some loved Ant's professionalism and innovation. Others whispered that he didn't get what Wheeler Dealers was supposed to be. And through it all, Ant stayed professional. On camera, he smiled. He cracked jokes. He delivered results. But inside, the comparison was wearing thin. Even worse, Mike didn't do much to redirect it. He'd speak fondly of Edd in interviews, leaning on nostalgia while standing beside Ant. Whether intentional or not, it kept Ant in the role of replacement, never partner. And no matter how hard he worked, Ant knew this show would never truly be his. When Edd China announced his departure, Mike Brewer faced the backlash. Not criticism, outrage. Death threats flooded his inbox. Fans blamed him for forcing Edd out, even though the real reasons were complex and rooted in production disagreements. But it didn't matter. The mob had chosen a villain. and Mike was it. In the eye of that storm stood Ant Anstead. He wasn't the cause of the drama, but he became collateral damage. Ant tried to play peacemaker. On Twitter, he publicly defended Mike, asking fans to calm down and give the new team a chance, but every post he made was met with venom. Traitor. Sellout. Fake. Fans weren't just mad, they were furious. Behind the scenes, the damage was real. Security was tightened. Tensions in production meetings were high. And Ant, who came in just wanting to build cars, found himself entangled in a public feud he never signed up for. The toll was emotional. Ant began limiting his social media. He stopped responding to fan comments. He withdrew, focusing on the builds and ignoring the noise. But the damage was already done. His trust in the process, and maybe even his friendship with Mike, was cracking. Worse still, some insiders claim that Ant's public defense of Mike created private tension between them. The message was clear: thanks for the loyalty. Now keep your head down and work. And that's when Ant started to ask himself, is this worth it? While the cameras rolled and the cars rolled out, something deeper was unraveling. Ant and Mike didn't share the same vision for wheeler dealers. At first, it seemed like a simple case of different styles. Ant came from a design-driven background, always pushing for sleeker lines, subtle upgrades, and modern innovation. Mike, on the other hand, was rooted in the old-school charm. Buy low, fix smart, sell fast. But as episodes progressed, it became clear. Their philosophies were clashing. Ant began pushing for projects that incorporated electric tech, sustainable builds, and creative redesigns. He wanted to modernize wheeler dealers, to show that classic cars could evolve. Meanwhile, Mike stuck to the formula: nostalgia, resale, and quick appeal. To him, EVs didn't fit the brand. They weren't wheeler dealers' material. Episodes became a quiet tug-of-war. Ant would suggest a subtle update, an improved brake conversion, a new age instrument cluster, and Mike would brush it off or question the added cost. For viewers, it was just banter. But in the shop, it reflected something bigger, a show being pulled in two directions. Even producers felt the tension. Do they stick with Mike's tried-and-true method that had worked for over a decade? Or lean into Ant's push for evolution and relevance? The result? Compromise on paper. But in reality, neither man felt like they were steering the ship anymore. And when a builder no longer has creative freedom, frustration turns into detachment. In late 2020, fans noticed something strange. Ant Anstead hadn't been on set. No promos, no teasers. And then the news quietly broke. Ant was out. Wheeler dealers had moved on, bringing in a new mechanic, Mark Elvis Priestley. Just like that, the Anstead era ended without a goodbye episode, no emotional send-off, no final restoration ride into the sunset. The announcement was cold, a press release here, a casual mention there. Mike Brewer thanked Ant vaguely on social media and immediately pivoted to the next chapter. Ant said little, if anything. No farewell tour, no recap video, just silence. For longtime viewers, the change felt jarring. Even Edd China had left with an open letter, a direct explanation, a moment of closure. With Ant, it was a clean break. Quiet, professional, but unmistakably final. Rumors swirled. Had there been a falling out? Did Ant leave by choice, or was he pushed out? Some fans believed Ant simply couldn't deal with the backstage politics anymore. Others suspected producers wanted a reset, a return to simpler, less divisive days. But one thing was certain. The chemistry that once fueled the show had died long before the cameras stopped rolling. And the silence surrounding Ant's exit said more than any press statement ever could. After leaving Wheeler Dealers, Ant Anstead didn't launch into interviews. He didn't take jabs. He didn't hint at drama. Instead, he went silent and stayed silent. No public words about Mike Brewer. No references to the show. Even in appearances and podcasts, Ant carefully sidestepped the topic. And that silence? It spoke volumes. Sources close to production say Ant had grown disillusioned, not just with the workload, but with the environment. It wasn't just the creative tension or the internet backlash, it was the feeling that he was replaceable, that no matter how good the work, the brand would roll forward without him. No credits, no legacy, just another mechanic on the conveyor belt of TV. The personal connection between Ant and Mike? Gone. The two haven't been spotted together since the show. No guest episodes, no reunions, no birthday posts, or mutual shout-outs. And while Mike occasionally references past co-hosts, Ant's name rarely, if ever, comes up. It's a professional ghosting, clean, quiet, intentional. Ant poured years into that garage, trying to honor the craft on screen. And when he left, he didn't ask for applause. He just walked away. And if you're wondering whether he'll ever go back, the silence says it all. Over the next few years, Ant Anstead gave interviews. He promoted new projects, spoke about design philosophy, and even shared personal updates. But when it came to Wheeler Dealers, specifically Mike Brewer, his answers got vague, polished, strategic. When asked directly, he'd say things like, "It was a great experience. I learned a lot from my time there. The team was incredible." But never once did he say Mike's name. In the world of television, what you don't say matters more than what you do. Ant wasn't bitter, at least not publicly. But those who followed closely noticed the pattern. In podcasts, when hosts brought up the show, Ant would redirect to talk about craftsmanship or the builds, not the people. When asked about co-host dynamics, he'd pivot to creative differences or growth. It was cordial, but cold. Meanwhile, Mike Brewer continued on Wheeler Dealers with a new partner, acting as if Ant's chapter was a footnote. No flashbacks, no tributes, no clips from their episodes together. Fans noticed. Questions piled up. Was there bad blood? Ant never confirmed it. But in an industry where silence is rare, his consistent, intentional omissions painted a clear picture. The door wasn't just closed, it was sealed shut. Because sometimes the cleanest cuts leave no scar. Just a silence that says, "We're done." Post-Wheeler Dealers, Ant Anstead didn't fade into the background. He reinvented himself on his own terms. First came Radford Returns, a bold revival of the legendary coach-building company. It was everything Wheeler Dealers wasn't: modern, ambitious, and deeply rooted in performance design. Ant wasn't fixing tired old engines anymore. He was designing custom supercars for elite clients, collaborating with names like Jensen Button, and working in high-end garages filled with carbon fiber, not rust. The shift was massive, but intentional. Then came his own ventures: custom builds, restoration projects, and televised specials that focused less on flipping and more on feeling. Ant leaned into storytelling, design, personal connection. And the best part? He was no longer the second man on a show. He was the lead. Interviews now focused on his process, his voice, his values. And every move made it clear. He wasn't interested in revisiting the past, especially not the chapter with Mike Brewer. There were no grudges aired, but there was also no room left for the old format. Ant was building again, not just cars, but a future without limits. And in that future, there's no room for a co-host holding the wheel. To this day, fans ask the question, will Ant Anstead ever return to Wheeler Dealers? The short answer, no. The long answer, he doesn't need to. Those close to the production say the relationship between Ant and Mike is cordial, but distant. No bad-mouthing, no legal fallout. Just two professionals who no longer see the road the same way. Brewer remains the face of the show, rolling out projects with Elvis Presley, keeping the formula alive. But something's missing, and longtime fans feel it. Ant, meanwhile, has evolved far past the format. He's hosting high-end build series, working with F1 champions, and raising the bar for what car TV can be. He isn't the garage guy anymore. He's an entrepreneur, a designer, a storyteller. And behind the scenes, insiders say Ant has quietly turned down any offers related to Wheeler Dealers. He's not interested in a guest episode, not a reunion, not even a flashback special. Whatever happened off-camera between him and Brewer, whether it was creative burnout, a lack of credit, or personal distance, it's enough to make sure that door stays closed. Because sometimes silence isn't anger, it's clarity. And for Ant Anstead, the message is simple. He's never going back.